Hello, as it's Mental Health Awareness Week this week, I decided it would be a great idea to invite Jonathan Pittam for a discussion. Jonathan is a mental health educator. He helps people managers reduce mental health related absenteeism, presenteeism, and staff turnover. So thanks, Jonathan, for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to having a discussion with you about mental health. So I'd just like to ask you a first question, which is, what would you say to a manager who wants to help maybe an employee with their mental health struggles? They can see they're struggling and they want to help them. What would you say to them?
I think that the saying bit is probably part of the problem. I think that's the trap that a lot of managers fall into. They think they have to be saying or telling or giving advice. And I think when we get into the fall into the advice trap, that's probably when we're not being as effective as we could be when it comes to supporting someone. So I think the most useful thing to do is switch the saying for asking and start asking to try and understand the person, because two people who are depressed or two people who are anxious are going to have probably have different reasons for why they are where they are. So I think until we start asking, we're not going to know those reasons and won't be able to gain the sort of understanding that helps us to work with the person to move forward to helping them improve their situation. So let's switch the saying, the telling, for asking.
That's brilliant. I love that. It's so important to really understand someone else's world and what they're going through. And I think it's so easy to misunderstand sometimes people's behavior, for instance. What kind of things might you ask?
Ask them maybe how they're feeling, because I guess you want to get an in-depth understanding of the emotional world. What sort of things they're feeling? Is it anxiety? Are they feeling anxious? Are they feeling low? What are they feeling? And they might use words like stress. And these sort of words, what they do, they give us points then that we can then question further and probe. Because if you ask 100 people what they mean by stress, you're probably going to get 60 different answers.
Yeah.
Even the same, with anxiety. So all these terms get quite conflated. And if we just leave it at, this person says they're stressed, maybe they need a few days off, we're actually missing an opportunity to explore what they mean by stress. Because they might mean I'm going through financial problems. They might mean I'm having relationship problems. They might mean I'm in debt. We don't know until we ask. So that's why the questions are so powerful. So understanding how they're feeling, what's been going on in their life at the moment, what maybe times previously they've experienced this and what they've done about them. It's just all about exploration.
Sure. No, I really love that actually, and being open to the answers and just listening, I suppose, and being very much in the present moment with them and listening with understanding. Again, not assuming. I think it would be so easy to make assumptions about things when people start speaking.
Yes.
It must be a real skill. How can do you would you have some tips about developing those skills?
How to develop those skills? I guess you've got to be curious. If you're a curious person, then it's going to come easy. I think if you're maybe not that curious, you're going to want to rush to solutions. It The person said, "Oh, I'm feeling stressed. Okay, here's what you need to do. Here's Sarina. Here's what you need to do. You need to go for a walk. You need to get some fresh air. Or you need to get yourself a kitten." Even before you've fully explored what's going on. So I think, yeah, curiosity is the most important thing. And I use the analogy of a tree. You look at a tree and you think you can see the whole tree there, the branches, the base of the tree. But actually, most of the tree, or the most important part, is underneath the ground. And the bit that's actually created the bit you see above the ground is underground. So we don't see that. And if we think of that, the person above the ground, the tree above the ground, is the person, their personality, it's their maybe their appearance, the things that you know about them. But all the things that are fed into them, their values, their life experience, their educational level, their past relationships, their culture, all of those things that feed into what you see above the ground, we don't really know. And the person is best placed themselves to be the expert because they've been through and they've lived through all of that, whereas we haven't. So when we give someone advice, we're assuming we know those roots, the values, the personality better than that person, and that's why advice usually falls on deaf ears or doesn't work.
Sure. No, that's a great point, actually. Yeah, yeah. No, thanks for sharing that. Um, yeah, it's so important to actually be curious about those roots, and we have no clue. Actually, we have no clue.
I think
So
also because we feel uncomfortable with unknowns. So it's this person comes to a manager and they're struggling, and the manager thinks, well, maybe they've got to fix the person because managers are fixers. That's why you become a manager, because you're the one with the best answers, and maybe that's how you became manager. And I think we see, oh, we need to fix this person, and we're uncomfortable with sitting with uncertainty. So I think if we can get a
Yes.
bit more comfortable with the unknown and uncertainty, we're probably going to be able to support someone more effectively.
Yep, I love that. That's brilliant. I think it takes a lot of confidence to be able to do that because there can be this fear as well. You know, as you said, it's a
Mm.
discomfort. You know, I'm not sure if I'd be comfortable if they'd start talking about feelings
Yes,
kind of
yeah.
thing.
It's vulnerability for a lot of people, isn't it? It's by not giving the answers, I'm not being the expert there. And for a lot of people, that's not a comfortable place to be in. It's I need to be seen as the one having the solutions and the answers and knowing the most. And that's why a lot of people aren't ideally placed to be having those conversations because they're too solution focused rather than exploration focused.
Yes, no, absolutely. I think it's a similar thing with public speaking when you're trying to help someone to be confident, and it's about seeing, you know, what's going on for them and exploring, you know, the things that they need to be confident that they can support themselves in their journey
Yes.
rather than, I can fix you. You
Yeah.
know, here's a
Yeah.
solution.
Like Jim will fix it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it can be so tempting, I think, to want to do that because we feel better with, oh yes, I can, you know, I can fix you. um,
Exactly. Well, that's what I like about your approach. I think with teaching people how to be more confident in public speaking, because I think you're quite holistic and you're not saying this is the way to do it. You're understanding the individual and helping them to move towards what will work for them, rather than you saying, right, do X, Y, Z. This is going to make you a better public speaker. It's again understanding the person and helping them get to where they need to be.
For sure. Yes. In that sense, I think we have quite a similar approach to that. It's so important because we are all so different and different things work for different people. You know, one of the things I
Mm,
find fascinating is that people can sort of give blanket advice. If you feel anxious, do this. Because it depends on
yes.
the level of anxiety you've got. You could just be overall, you're quite confident, but you feel a bit nervous about a speech. Or you've had
Mm,
a serious confidence problem and you're on the verge of a panic attack giving this speech.
mm,
And that would require such a different process of getting you on
yeah.
stage speaking.
Do you think it's maybe that's part down to terminology then? Because two people would use the same thing. They say, I'm terrified of public speaking. They've probably got totally different reasons why. One
Yes.
might have been laughter in front of, by a teacher or something like that. One might have been criticized in public or something. We don't know, but they would both use the same words to describe. They would both say, I'm afraid or anxious about public speaking.
Yep.
And until we explore that, we're not going to realize difference between person A and B. They're two totally different experiences, but they're using the same terminology to describe them.
For sure. Absolutely. Going back to your point about stress, just I'm stressed, it could mean something completely different from one person to another.
Of
So,
course.
yeah. No, I really like that idea of exploring, being open to people's experiences and I guess empowering them, would you say, empowering them to find solutions, find ways forward.
That's exactly the word. I think empowerment, because, and we don't really empower by giving advice. I mean, even if we give someone advice, we think, yes, brilliant, because they've said they nodded at us while we are giving our amazing advice and we've done a great job, but they walk out the room and they're probably not going to do it. Because if you fix someone, they will either come back to you because they've not been empowered to do it themselves. So they'll think they can rely on the other person, and it obviously adds more to the manager's workload anyway. If you've got some people constantly coming back to you because they rely on you for that fixing rather than relying on themselves, it's not good for either of you. So I think it's like the hare and the tortoise. Giving advice seems like the fast way to do it because you get the conversation over quickly and the person's gone, but they'll keep coming back to you. Whereas asking the questions is like the tortoise. It takes longer to get going, but it's actually more rewarding, beneficial in the long run to ask and explore rather than tell.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's a great analogy, actually. Um, sorry, my speaker's making a funny noise. Yeah, great analogy about that because it is a long-term process, and that's why I think, for instance, developing confidence, that's one area I'm really passionate about, and I think that's what a similar area where you can't just, you know, be confident overnight.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
It's a journey that you take. You know, you break through layer after layer of fear and things that are holding you back. But it's this
Mm,
long process. But then the result of that is that you have a more authentic confidence because you've taken the journey of the tortoise, going slowly and building the building blocks of your confidence over time, rather than trying to
mm.
just, you know, put on a show and then feeling awful afterwards because you never really felt confident anyway.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Yeah, because around public speaking, yeah, there's a lot of tricks out there, aren't there? And try this and try those certain things, and almost like taking beta blockers or something, which would have the effect so would a bottle of Budweiser before you go out and speak. But has that made you a more confident public speaker, or has it masked something to allow you go out and speak? And I would rather have something like what you teach that enables people to get that deep, authentic confidence that allows them to be able to regularly do it in life, not just for a quick fix, drink the bottle of Bud equivalent and go out and deliver a speech.
For sure. Yes, I'm a firm believer in that, which is, I think that's so similar to what you do in your training. And I think that's it's essential to have feel authentic confidence, to have a sense of well-being rather than putting on a show because that show is
Mm.
going to end, and then at the end of it we don't feel great at all.
Well, I
Um,
think we all societally, we kind of think we have to look perfect. There's this thing, isn't there? I think if you look at the sort of gender roles, men should never show weakness, should always be strong, and women will always have to look and be perfect. And I think we have to feel we have to match up to these standards all the time. And if you're always putting on a front, then eventually at some point things are going to crack. So I think it is willing to be vulnerable and share things when you are struggling, not necessarily oversharing, which we kind of see a lot of on social media, but just being able to willing to tell someone when you're having a tough time. I think that takes a bit of vulnerability, shows a bit of vulnerability, and I think that's never a bad thing.
No, absolutely not. No, I think vulnerability is a huge area, and it does take strength to show that. Again, knowing what to share and what not to, but just knowing if it has a function. Actually, I'm having a really bad time. It could be a really good idea to tell the manager that this is what's going
Mm.
on. So that
Well, I
there's
think also managers showing vulnerability would enable the person who's sat in front of them to think, my boss has just told me about the time he struggled. Therefore, I realize, okay, maybe it's safe, it's okay for me to talk about a time I've struggled. Because if I think I'm telling someone about how low I feel and they're going to put it down on my company record, when it comes time for promotions, he's going to think, well, actually, I'm not going to pick the guy who's got that on his record. But if my boss has actually said that he struggled or she struggled in the same way, it says to me, okay, it's all right for me to do so as well.
yes, for sure, and I think it's so important because it can be this. We can have this idea that we have to be this confident person, and then everyone else will have confidence in us, but it just doesn't
Yes.
work that way. Everyone's developed their confidence, and if you show that human side, yes, I've had anxiety, I've had an anxiety disorder, I've had these challenges, then it
Mm.
almost it gives people permission to say, oh, do you know what, I have as well.
Yeah. Yeah, of
What you
course.
were saying, I think it does. It makes people much more relaxed and more likely that they will open up, and then we can start having meaningful discussions that are actually beneficial for everyone
Mm.
involved, and ultimately, I think creates better communication for people.
Oh, absolutely. I 100% agree. I think conversations are key. And I think when we feel we can start talking about things that have happened in our lives, most of us have got all these things that have happened make for really interesting stories as well. And I
Good
think
point.
when we share our stories, other people will learn from them indirectly and maybe give them ideas on how they can come forward. And not saying that what works for one works for another. I don't mean that, but I mean, when you hear a story, it can give you hope, but it can also show you about how somebody else used their resources as well. So I think the more we share our stories, the better it is for everybody.
That's great. That's really inspiring to hear about that, because I know that I'm inspired by people's stories, and it's just about getting that courage, isn't it, to think about how can my story help someone, and then go ahead and share it.
Get it out there. You've got a great story, so get it out there.
Great. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining me today. And I hope this is, I absolutely have no doubt this has benefited people listening. So thank you very much.